You're listening to the Positive Distraction Podcast with Alexander McCall Smith.
Who would be a politician? In the past, it might have been a pursuit that the moderately thin-skinned might enter. No longer. Now it is all very competitive and confrontational. Insults are exchanged, and the past raked up to embarrass one's opponents. In this story, the subject is political sleaze, something that keeps occurring and embarrassing political parties of every stripe. Many politicians dread sleazy disclosures. Others may take a rather different view. Some may even court accusations of sleaze, as happens in this story. Sleaze. He was called Pooter, which was an unfortunate name. Had he been called Potter or Porter, it would have been different. Those were names with some forward motion to them, names that would never bring a smile to anybody's lips, but Pooter. Of course, not everybody knew about George Grothsmith's fictional creation, Charles Pooter, in his Diary of a Nobody, but there were still those who read that book and knew all about its unfortunate hero. They were the ones who, on hearing his name, might begin to say, Pooter, as in Diary of, and then, not wishing to appear tactless, not complete the sentence. But there was no point in bemoaning his name. He was Charles Pooter, MP, member for an obscure constituency that few people had ever heard of, and that even fewer people could find on the map. He was 52, a bit stout, although he had embarked on a low-carb diet and was hoping to shed a few pounds before the next election. He was not all that tall, but not unduly short either, especially when wearing the elevator shoes that his wife had given him for his 45th birthday. And, as passports used to put it, he had no distinguishing features. That, in fact, was part of the problem. He had no distinguishing features, in any sense. He'd been in Parliament for 10 years. When first elected, he'd been a member of one of the large political parties, but after a couple of years, he'd left to join a new party that he had founded with 2 other sitting members. This was a centrist party, and they decided to call it the Extreme Moderates. This, they thought, was a good name and served to distinguish them from another small parliamentary party called the Moderate Extremists. "We differ from the Moderate Extremists in many ways," said Mr. Pooter. "They are more extreme than we are, and we are markedly more moderate. Is that quite clear?" Nobody paid much attention to the extreme moderates, or to Mr. Pooter as the party's leader. He received none of the invitations issued to other party leaders, was never interviewed on the radio, and in spite of regularly offering to be on Question Time, he was never asked to participate. Even the local paper seemed largely unaware of his activities, and if it ever mentioned his name, it usually misspelled it, calling him Parker, Porker, and on one occasion Potty. When he wrote to the editor suggesting that a correction be published, he received a reply, "Does it really matter? Our readers probably don't care all that much. Let's not bother, but thank you for sharing your concerns with us." From time to time, Mr. Pooter took part in parliamentary debates. He spoke once on the issue of canals and towpaths. He intervened in a debate on wind farms, when he asked whether these installations were capable of generating power when there was no wind, and he had something to say on intellectual property in cheeses. None of his contributions ever made the press, and indeed several of them were not even reported in Hansard. Mr. Pooter's protest about these omissions was met with the explanation that the tape recorders had run out of tape at the precise juncture that he rose to speak, and nobody had any recollection of what he had said. Mr. Pooter called a meeting with the 2 other members of the extreme moderates. This took place in the corner of the tea room, as his request for a meeting room appeared to have been ignored by those responsible for room bookings. One of the members forgot to attend this meeting, but the other did turn up. This was Iris Wilson, who was more recently elected than Mr. Pooter, and who was still finding her way about the corridors of Westminster. "I have become concerned by our lack of profile," said Mr. Pooter. "Nobody pays any attention to us. We get no press coverage to speak of." "True," said Iris Wilson. "It's most disappointing. We have so much to offer. But how can we get our message over to people if extreme moderates are never mentioned in the newspapers, let alone on the radio or television?" "Look at all those other MPs," complained Mr. Pooter. "You see them in the papers all the time. You hear people talking about them. They're everywhere." Iris Wilson looked thoughtful. "Of course, a lot of them," she said, "are in the public eye because of scandals of one sort or another, because of Sleaze and so on. That's how people get to hear of them." She sighed, as if even the contemplation of political corruption made her feel wary. Mr. Pooter agreed that this was so. "Not that it appears to do them any harm," he said. The papers regularly show them to be involved in some sort of fiddle, but does it harm them? It does not, I'm afraid. It just makes them famous, and they get lots of offers of lucrative jobs as a result, consultancies, advisory positions, non-executive directorships, lucrative sinecures of every sort. The world becomes their lobster. "Oyster," corrected Iris Wilson. "No, they get lobster," insisted Mr. Pooter bitterly. Iris Wilson looked out of the window. An idea had occurred to her. "What if we were to be involved in a bit of sleaze?" she asked. Mr. Pooter stared at her. "Us," he said. "The extreme moderates? You and me?" She nodded. "I know that sleaze is more of a moderate extremist thing, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be, what's the word they use, be mired in a bit of sleaze. It would be a surefire way of getting into the papers, with our photographs too, under a big headline that might say, 'Sleaze engulfs top extreme moderates.'" "I'm not sure they'd have to say top extreme moderates," said Mr. Pooter. "There are only 3 of us, and there's nobody who's exactly beneath us." "It's just a turn of phrase," said Iris Wilson. "The sort of paper that runs that sort of story always refers to people as being top something or other. It's a way of showing respect, I think." Mr. Pooter was thinking. "I'm prepared to try it," he said. "I'm prepared to accept an executive directorship. I'm prepared to advise a foreign government, somewhere warm preferably." Iris Wilson laughed. "Oh, very funny," she said, "but quite right. You don't want to end up advising the government of somewhere dark and dismal." "And I could let out my house and then come and live in your flat," Mr. Pooter went on, "and you could charge me rent." "Oh, yes," enthused Iris Wilson. "At market rates, of course, all above board, and the rent will be a parliamentary expense, all perfectly legal. And I'll move out once you move in, and I'll rent somewhere and claim that against expenses." "Perhaps somewhere quite far away," said Mr. Pooter. "Then you could claim train fare every day." "There and back," said Iris Wilson. "First class," said Mr. Pooter. "Of course, if the trains are late, you may need to stay in the occasional hotel. 5-star, naturally." Mr. Pooter smiled. He was enjoying this. 4 at a pinch. One would not wish to be, he searched for the word, and Iris Wilson found it, profligate, she suggested. One would not wish to be profligate? Naturally. "This is all very promising," said Iris Wilson, but then her face fell. "But if we're to be truly sleazy, how do we actually get the backhanders? How do we get the lucrative advisory roles? And what do we advise people about?" "We make telephone calls," said Mr. Pooter. "We phone up ministries and give them the names of our clients, the people who are paying us to be sleazy." "And then?" "And then we ring off," said Mr. Pooter. "It's not at all complicated." He paused. "I shall put an advertisement in the papers. I shall say, MP seeks lucrative consultancy opportunities, something like that. Iris Wilson looked doubtful. "Do you think that will work?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm sure it will. There are plenty of people who are just itching to get sleazy with an MP. Plenty of them." He put the advertisement in an evening paper and waited for a response. Nothing happened for a day or two, but then a fistful of letters was delivered to his constituency office. Each of these contained attractive proposals and expressed a wish that the future could be one of productive collaboration. There were 3 offers of paid directorships and 1 chairmanship. There was one offer of 2 weeks on a yacht in the Mediterranean, investigating overcrowding and restaurant provision in Antibes. There were other letters, delivered by registered post, that contained large quantities of currency for incidental constituency-related expenses. "You must accept them all," said Iris Wilson. "This is real sleaze, and when it comes out, you'll be all over the papers. You'll achieve instant name recognition. Instant. The political benefit will be incalculable. People will hear of the extreme moderates for a change. Just think of that." "I am thinking of it," said Mr. Pooter. "It's recognition that's long overdue. And just remember," continued Iris Wilson, "there's no such thing as bad publicity." Mr. Pooter looked worried. "But I could get into real trouble," he said. "I could get suspended." Iris Wilson shook her head. "That never happens," she said. "You're perfectly safe." He wrote back to all those who made a sleazy offer, accepting their kind sentiments of regard and agreeing to their proposals. Within a week, he was a director of 6 companies, had accepted a visit to Azerbaijan, joined the board of KGB Moscow Limited, and had agreed for a fee to endorse a Taiwanese whiskey called Tartan Mist. He was very busy. "Time to leak it to the press," said Miss Wilson. "I'll make the call." It appeared in the papers, but only in 2, and in a very small report, in neither case on page 1, and in each case his name was misspelled. "Popper accused of sleaze," said one headline, and another said, "Pepper allegedly on the take." This was enough, though, to attract the attention of Parliament itself. Incensed at this blatant attempt by the extreme moderates to muscle in on a hitherto protected preserve of the larger parties, an emergency debate was called. Mr. Pooter was pilloried by his fellow members. The comments were all heartfelt in their indignation. "Shocking," said one backbencher. "People like Potter should be shown in no uncertain terms that this sort of thing is quite unacceptable." Another said, "Really have we seen such blatant disregard for standards? Pollock is bringing us all into disrepute." After the debate, a hearing was held. It lasted only 20 minutes, and Mr. Pooter was required to give up his seat entirely. "Such a pity," said Iris Wilson. "I really didn't think they'd take it seriously. What with the stuff that everybody else has been getting up to." Mr. Pooter looked miserable. "What will happen to the party?" he asked. "This wasn't in the script, you know." Iris Wilson shrugged. "Politics can be unpredictable," she said, "but don't worry about the party. I shall stand for the leader's post in your place." She paused. "On an anti-sleaze ticket. I expect I'll win." He looked at her. He bit his lip. Sleaze was ubiquitous. It was everywhere, as was ambition.
Thank you for joining Sir Alexander McCall Smith on his Positive Distraction podcast. You can find Alexander's books and details of all his forthcoming events on his website, www.alexandermccallsmith.com. All are available to purchase in your local independent high street bookshop, on Amazon, or on bookshop.org. Alexander is the much-loved author of global bestseller The #1 Ladies Detective Agency, the long-running 44 Scotland Street serial novel, the Isabel Dalhousie novels, the new Perfect Passion Company series, and many standalone novels and short story collections. In addition, he is known throughout the world for his reassuring, restorative poetry collections. In moments of darkness in the world, readers turn to his work to lift them from the gloom.